Having removed the throttle body, the next step is to remove the fuel rail. And to do that, we have to remove a couple of other portions, including these two brackets that hold on pieces of the throttle assembly. First item here is the actual throttle linkage itself. The other item, I believe, is part of the controller for cruise control. Not certain of that. It doesn't really matter. It does need to be removed so that this plate here can be removed for the fuel rail. Things that you need for this are a 10mm socket. You're going to use a lot of that on this car. I prefer to use a 1/4-inch drive. So socket wrench, a couple sizes of extensions. I like to use a long one. You may also need a universal joint. You could also use the screwdriver method if necessary. A very small screwdriver and a rag, doesn't matter if it's clean. The first step is to remove, or rather to release, the fuel pressure using the Schrader valve at the very back of the fuel rail. There's a cap that you can remove. And what you want to do is press on the center piece of the Schrader valve, just like you would on, a bicycle tire, and use the rag to catch any fuel runoff. I'm going to pause while I do that. With the fuel pressure release, you want to put the cap back on the Schrader valve so you don't lose it and don't cause any damage to it. Next part is to remove the two parts of the throttle assembly here. The first portion that actually has the linkage on it, first thing you'll need to do is to remove the throttle cable. Set the camera down while I do this, but essentially you move this forward like this. The cable goes under and up. By slacking this, you'll be able to remove the holder here. With the cable set aside somewhere safe, relatively safe, you now have 3 10mm bolts. One here, which is also holding a bracket for the idle air control valve electrical connector, another directly behind that, and then one between the throttle cable and the bracket here. I find that a long extension works best. For the portion in the back, you have 2 10mm bolts going toward the front of the car. One here and then one just down from that here. I find that no extension or a short extension works best here. I'm gonna remove those by hand. Having removed the 3 10mm bolts on the throttle linkage, you can simply set that aside right here on the top of the head. Be careful with it. Should be safe over there though. This portion with the fuel pressure regulator and the cruise control thing, I don't know what it's called. 2 bolts are out here. This you can't completely remove because it is attached to fuel lines. You don't really need to remove it fully either. You just need a little bit of play in it like this. Because the next step is just to remove this cover that protects the injectors and the cables that go to them. From here you can see all 6 injectors pretty easily. You'll notice that each has an electrical connector as well as 2 grounds that are held with a 10mm. For the grounds, simply need to unbolt these from the head. For the electrical connectors, just like any others, you push in the metal clip and these pop out pretty easily. Because of the little bit of clearance, I find that it's easiest to use a screwdriver or something of that nature. Once you have each of the electrical connectors and the grounds removed, which is pretty easy to do, you could label them if you wanted to. I don't see any need to, because of the way that they're oriented. It'd be pretty difficult to put them in the wrong place. I would, however, be very careful with this. The wires, for me, do not feel terribly brittle. This outside sort of shielding does, but that's not so important. Nevertheless, you wouldn't want to have an electrical problem here. Next, you have 3 10mm bolts, one between the first and second portion of the intake manifold, another one between the third and fourth, and then finally one between the last two, so number 5 and 6 back there. I believe you can just see that. I find what's easiest to use for this is a 10mm socket, of course, but also a long extension and a piece of masking tape stuck into the long extension that will hold on to that bolt and not drop it down in here. So I'm going to do that and then we'll come back. This is what I'm talking about with the tape. That basically just holds it in there because it is easy to lose. It's really less the stickiness of the tape as the extra space that it takes up in the socket that just scotches it in there. I've also put tape between the extension and on the extension and the socket itself because they have a tendency to fall off and get lost. Once the electrical connections and the 3 bolts along the bottom of the fuel rail have been removed, you can simply pull this out toward you at a slight angle. The injectors go in sort of at this angle into the manifold. If these have not come out for a while, it's a possibility that the O-rings have become baked to the intake manifold and it will be a bit more difficult. Rest assured though, if you have disconnected everything, you have these 2 brackets out of the way, and you've taken out those 3 bolts, the resistance that you're feeling is just that it's stuck in there for years and years.